The knock at the window. It began on a quiet winter evening in a forgotten countryside house surrounded by empty fields and frostbitten trees. Marcus had recently moved in, escaping the noise of the city to finish a book that had haunted him for years. The house, nestled between skeletal woods and snow-covered meadows, had a kind of stillness that felt almost staged. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the hiss and pop of the fireplace and the muffled thrum of snowflakes brushing against the window panes. Marcus had made a ritual of his nights: a glass of wine, an old wool blanket, the faded armchair beside the fire. His typewriter sat dormant, untouched for weeks, while blank pages waited like open mouths. He hadn't written a word since moving in. Something about the quiet unsettled him, too quiet, as if the house was holding its breath. As night deepened, a rhythmic tapping began at the window. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 slow knocks. He paused, the wineglass halfway to his lips. A pause, then another 3 taps. Cautiously, he rose and crossed the room. The frost had begun to creep up the corners of the glass. When Marcus pulled back the curtain, there was nothing, only the pale reflection of himself, the fire flickering behind him, and the endless white beyond. The next night, the knocking returned. Again, 3 taps. Again, no one there. Snow had erased any tracks. On the 3rd night, he stayed by the window, watching. The wind curled around the house in whispers, but no creature stirred. Still, the knocks came, softer this time, as if whoever or whatever stood outside no longer needed to be heard. Just acknowledged. He stopped sleeping. He kept the lights on. Each night, as the clock crept toward 2, he would hear it again. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, almost polite. Then silence. Then nothing but the sound of his own breath and the wind testing the walls. By the end of the week, Marcus began to notice small changes in the house. The mirror in the hallway was no longer quite level. His boots, left by the front door, would shift an inch or 2 overnight. Books moved ever so slightly on the shelves. And once he found his typewriter had typed a single line in the dark, just one word: listen. He checked the windows. He installed a camera. But nothing ever appeared. The camera would go static at 1:59 a.m. and return to normal at 2:04 with no explanation. During the lost minutes, the knocks continued. And yet he remained. Something in him couldn't leave, couldn't look away. The house, with all its creaks and sighs, felt like it was trying to show him something. Or hide something. He wandered its halls at night, flashlight in hand, stopping now and then to press his ear to the walls. Once, beneath the staircase, he thought he heard a voice, not a word, but a breath, close and deliberate. Outside, the snow thickened. The figure had not yet come. But the knocks continued. Always 3. Always at 2. And every time he opened the curtain, there was nothing. Nothing at all. But Marcus had begun to wonder if, perhaps, it wasn't someone outside trying to come in. Maybe, just maybe, it was something already inside asking to be seen. The visitor in the field. Days after the knocking began, Marcus noticed a new presence. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, a tall shape at the far edge of the frozen field, hunched and silent. From his kitchen window, it resembled a scarecrow bound in layers of dark fabric, with a head that drooped slightly to one side. But as the hours passed, the figure remained unnaturally still, and something about the posture made Marcus uneasy. The next morning, it had moved. Not much, but enough to notice. It stood now at a different angle, facing directly toward the house. Each day brought a subtle shift. Sometimes it was closer to the tree line. Other times it was halfway across the field. Never approaching too quickly, never vanishing completely. Always just far enough away to avoid full detail. Marcus tried to convince himself it was his imagination, that the shape was a pile of old equipment or a distant tree trunk made unfamiliar by the snow. But in the pit of his stomach, he knew it was watching. At night, the sensation of being observed intensified. Lights flickered more often. Cold drafts pushed through sealed windows. The quiet became oppressive. One evening, as Marcus lay in bed, a sound reached him, steady, low, like breathing. Not his own. Slow, deliberate breaths just beyond the door. When he summoned the courage to open it, he found only the empty hallway. But frost had bloomed along the inside edges of the doorframe, delicate and sharp like veins of ice. The figure outside remained. By day, it was a dark blemish on the landscape. By night, it haunted his thoughts. The air in the house grew heavier. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Marcus began to wake in the early hours, convinced someone had just left the room. He found furniture subtly displaced, drawers open a crack that he never recalled touching. Then came the whispering. It started faint, like the rustling of dry leaves, easy to ignore. But each night it grew clearer, more defined. Words swam through the silence. Never loud, always urgent. They didn't seem to come from any one place. The walls carried them, the air conducted them. They called his name, repeatedly, sometimes pleading, sometimes cold. Marcus kept his curtains closed now. He didn't want to see how close the figure had come, but he could feel it. Its presence settled like dust on the back of his neck. It wasn't just in the field anymore. It was inside the walls, inside the whispers, waiting for something, watching, always watching. Hollow eyes. The whispers had changed. No longer random or broken, they formed patterns now. They slipped through the vents, echoed from behind walls, curled beneath the floorboards. At first, they spoke his name, breathless and faint. But then they began to say things he had never voiced aloud. Memories of childhood shame, hidden guilt, things buried deep. It was as though the house had begun to learn him. Peel back the layers he hadn't realized were still there. He found footprints one morning. Muddy, heavy, not his own. They trailed from the back door to the center of the hall and vanished. The snow outside remained undisturbed. Marcus didn't remember unlocking the door. He didn't remember sleeping at all. The footprints appeared again the next day, wet and darker. They led to the mirror in the hallway. The reflection showed everything exactly as it was, but his eyes seemed wrong. They lagged slightly when he blinked, a breath behind reality. It only happened in that mirror. The figure in the field was closer now, barely 100 feet from the porch. It no longer looked like a man. Something about the proportions was off, arms too long, neck too still. It never moved, yet every morning it was closer. Marcus stopped looking. He started keeping the lights on even during the day. One night, sleep took him in the chair by the fire. In his dream, he was digging beneath the floor, his hands bloody, the soil thick and warm like breath. A rhythmic knocking guided him deeper. When he woke, his hands were dirty, and the floorboards beside the hearth were shifted. Dampness seeped from between the cracks. He didn't remember moving them. He didn't want to remember. From then on, the house felt aware of him. The lights flickered when he entered rooms. The fireplace hissed like a warning. The whispering continued, but now it responded when he spoke. If he asked it to stop, it paused only to return louder the next night. The hallway mirror grew colder to the touch. Sometimes when he passed, he saw not himself, but someone else's silhouette moving away just before he turned his head. And at night, through the small living room window, he sometimes saw the figure. Standing. Waiting. Always watching. Beneath the house. He pulled the boards up during the day, careful not to make a sound, as if the house itself might object. Beneath them was a narrow hollow, more of a wound than a space. The air from it was cold and sour, like breath held too long. In that darkness lay a bundle of cloth, stained and curled like something once living. Bones peeked through frayed linen. At the center, wrapped tightly in scorched fabric, was a doll, burned, broken, yet still strangely intact, its hollow eyes staring from a cracked porcelain face. The moment his fingers brushed the cloth, the house seemed to exhale. A long, drawn-out groan moved through the beams, and every wall seemed to lean slightly inward. The fire sputtered, the lights dimmed. Shadows pooled deeper in the corners. Marcus backed away, heart pounding, the doll still in his hands. He placed it on the mantel without knowing why. That night, the knocking returned, not at the window this time, but beneath the floor, slow and wet as if something with weight and intention tapped from below. Marcus lay in bed, paralyzed, the covers pulled tight. Then he saw it. Someone stood at the foot of his bed. Small. Still. A child. Not the figure from the field. This was something else. It didn't move, didn't speak. Its skin was gray as ash, its eye sockets empty, weeping slow streams of black tears that vanished before hitting the floor. He blinked and the child was gone. But the cold remained. The knocking under the floor continued through the night, spreading through the walls, into the ceiling, like something crawling through the bones of the house. The whispers came louder now, layered with breath and rustling, as though dozens of mouths tried to speak through the same narrow throat. The next morning, Marcus found the doll had moved. It now sat in the middle of the room, facing the hearth, its head tilted. He hadn't touched it. He didn't dare. That evening, the lights refused to stay on. Every bulb dimmed the moment he entered. He lit candles, but their flames flickered with a rhythm that matched the knocking. Something had been awakened. Something buried beneath the boards, beneath memory, beneath the earth. And now that it had been touched, it would not rest again. The mirror cracks. Marcus tried to leave. The morning after the child appeared, he packed a bag without thinking and started his car, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The engine stuttered, groaned, then died. He tried again. Nothing. He walked, heading toward the main road, snow crunching underfoot, breath fogging in the freezing air. But every turn, every path, curved back to the house. Landmarks repeated. Trees reappeared. Time folded in on itself like pages in an unreadable book. Inside, the house changed. Minutes stretched thin, then collapsed into seconds. He would glance at the clock and find hours had passed without movement. Meals went uneaten. Candles burned down without being lit. Sleep became a memory. He stopped counting the days. The mirrors no longer reflected reality. Instead, they became portals to impossible places, dim hallways that twisted forever, flooded basements lit by flickering lamps, dense forests that burned but gave off no heat. He watched his reflection blink too late, then too early, then not at all. The hallway mirror cracked one morning, a perfect split down the center. From within it, a voice whispered his name in a way that made his skin prickle. The doll, left untouched on the mantel, vanished. He found it again beneath the floor, whispering in a child's voice, words too distorted to understand. The child appeared more often, always near the windows, always watching the figure in the field. And the field itself had changed. The snow was gone, replaced with something darker, something pulsing, as if the earth had grown veins and a heartbeat. Marcus boarded the windows. He closed the doors. But light still shifted strangely through the cracks, and every room seemed smaller than it had the day before. The air smelled of wet stone and rot. Walls bled thick, dark stains that moved like slow-growing vines. Objects disappeared. The fireplace grew cold even with flame. He tried to speak, but found his voice swallowed by the silence. Only the whispers replied. One morning, he woke to find words etched into the mirror above the sink. It remembers you. He tore the boards from the floor and screamed into the hollow beneath. There was no echo, only a single, gentle knock in response. Something beneath the house acknowledged him. Something that had always been waiting. He no longer feared the figure in the field. That had been the warning. Now, the house itself was the thing watching. The thing hungering. And Marcus, with eyes that no longer recognized the man in the mirror, was being unmade from the inside. Marcus remained motionless as the oppressive silence wrapped around the empty house like a suffocating shroud. The faint chill of the night seeped through cracked windows, brushing against his skin with an icy touch that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. Shadows moved in slow, deliberate patterns along the peeling wallpaper, twisting and curling as if alive. The air was thick with a heavy presence, something ancient and unyielding that pulsed beneath the very floorboards. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes, burning into him with an intensity that made his breath hitch. Time itself seemed to blur, each second stretching into an eternity where past and present collided in a restless dance. The doll he held, fragile and worn, grew impossibly heavy in his hands, its stitched smile fading into something darker. His reflection in the mirrors was no longer his own, but a fractured image shifting between faces he did not recognize. Then, the walls began to whisper secrets long buried. Names, promises, regrets, all curling around him like smoke from a dying fire. The house pulsed with a heartbeat not his own, syncing with the rhythm pounding in his chest. In that final moment, as the candle's flame flickered and died, the line between the living and the lost vanished. Marcus was no longer merely a witness but a part of the endless echo, forever watching from within the house's hollowed soul.